natural inclination in such beautiful places is to live in silence. Words feel rather shy to molest the virgin silence pervading the place. To be with the trees, the lake, the birds, the freshness of the breeze, the drizzling of rain, the icy cold winds. So many companions to commune with. The purity of the surroundings is fascinating. And yet one has to speak, to communicate, retreat the whole perspective of life, reconsider the whole way of living. But if one can be honest with you, process of verbalization in such a place feels so irrelevant. I'm sharing with you what has been happening for the last 2 days. You have requested that we speak about transformation of consciousness. Somebody has suggested meditation. Somebody has suggested what is beyond the self and the brain. The first day we arrived here, I had requested the participants to suggest the themes they would like to be taken up. And these are some of them. And there are questions that were handed over to me yesterday, which we might take up this afternoon. I wonder if we ever question what is living. What is the content of the act of living? Yes, you have to take education, have a job, raise a family if you want to do so. Handle the socio-economic structures. But what happens inwardly while we go through the travail of so-called daily living? What is living? And if it is getting related to that which is around us and within us, What is it that is around us? I do not know if you would be interested in looking at this fundamental issue along with me. What is living? What do we see around us? Sensually, we see objects, don't we? And these objects have been given names. The process of naming and identifying through the process of naming is the essence of human conditioning, the essence of human culture, civilization. So sensually, we see objects optically. And we see objects separate from one another. A tree, a mountain, a lake, a hill, a bird, the grass, and so on. We see them as separate objects having names and utility for human life. Is seeing objects an illusion? Seeing objects with definite shapes, colors, forms, seeing the separateness of them from one another, seeing them as separate entities. Is it the correct perception? Is it an illusion? If you and I say it is the correct way of perception, a physicist jumps and says there is nothing like matter. What you call an object, what you call a thing, is the construct of human brain. And if you then say to the physicist, okay, there are no objects, but there is matter, solid matter, I can touch it, I can feel the weight of it. The physicist says, sorry, that also is an illusion. There is nothing like matter, but it's only action and interaction of energies. I am interested in living, and living for me is having relationship, to relate myself to that which is around me. And so I question what is around me. The name given to an object as a tree is a construct of the human brain. A tree or a hill or what you will. The whole world, which we call the world, is a construct of the brain. So, the world is a construct. The names, the identifications are the result of human ingenuity, again constructs, ideas. And there is not even matter. Do you see? When we want to relate to that which is around us, what is around us, and according to science, what is around us is only a dance of energies, innumerable energies, acting and interacting. And it is the action and interaction of energies that creates the appearance of solidity. Please do see this. Physics is talking the language of metaphysics. language of spirituality. So one will have to be aware that what we call matter is the result of action and interaction between energies. And the names that we have attached to certain forms are the human way of looking at it. It is a human way of looking at. But the name is not the thing. There is nothing like a tree or a lake. Do you see that? To be aware that all the names and identifications are for our convenience. And yet relate to the specific manifestations of those energies and their interactions. This is a dual responsibility. When I go and jump into the lake, take a dive into the lake and swim, I do not say I am swimming in the dance of cosmic energies. I say I went for a swim to the lake. It's a dual responsibility to be aware inwardly what is the pure isness, to be aware of that, and yet to be able to relate sensually and verbally with the help of the process of naming and identifying. With the manifestations of energies. You climbed a hill and you swim in a lake. You don't swim on a hill. So, living for me, which is the movement of relationship, is something dual. It's a very complex thing. Perception of the real, perception of the essence, the existential essence, and a sense of awareness about the nature. That would be the content of consciousness, while sensually I appreciate the beauty of the forms. What I call the lake is a form. What I call the river has a form. So I appreciate and enjoy the beauty of the flow of the river and the placidity of the lake. On the sensual level, to be able to relate and enjoy. And yet inwardly, to be aware of the relative reality of the forms, the objects, the manifestations. To be aware of the ground of existence, the absolute ground of existence, where all the energies are intermingling, acting upon one another, creating a dance that you call cosmos. In between the sensual perception of the specific objects, their forms, their colors, and the awareness of the reality as it is. Stripped of all the names and identification, the isness, the measureless, the unnameable, the ungraspable by the senses. You cannot grasp the space with your hands, with your arms. You cannot embrace the space, the totality in which there are these forms. You are aware of that. The immensity of the space, the magnificent emptiness of the space, holding and containing so many forms. And sensually, you grasp the particularity of the object, you relate to it, you use the energy contained in it for nutrition, for exchange of energies. That's living, isn't it? Between these two, the sensual grip and the grasp through awareness, there is a third world that mankind has created. Please do see the perceptual level and then the level of awareness. In between the perceptual and the totality is the conceptual world, which is the stuff of our consciousness. The names, the identifications, the evaluations, the associations, the patterns, the conditionings, a marvelously gigantic world. And this conceptual world has been created with the help of word, W-O-R-D. You engineered the sound and you created a word. You organized the words and created an idea. You organized the ideas, created an ideology. Out of the ideology you created patterns, you followed them, and you produced conditionings by following those patterns. So marvelous conceptual structure is there in between the ultimate reality and what the senses hold. They can touch, they can have a grip. This conceptual world is the world of knowledge. You see a form, you give it a name tree, you describe its qualities, and you say, I know that it's a maple tree. The specification, the particularization, the categorization, the analysis. You define, you describe, that's the way you are trying to relate. And I say, that's the earth, that's the rock. So knowledge is the result of relating to the objective reality with the help of word, name, idea. On the perception, you graft a concept. The animals live at the perceptual level. There is no complexity. And they react instinctively. But we, the human beings, in addition to the instincts that we have inherited in the evolution of life, we have created a world of our own. So in order to have the process of naming and identifying, these words and terms and descriptions and definitions were necessary. So your and my consciousness, when we use that word, because you are asking about transformation of consciousness or in consciousness, we must know, we must find out, we must perceive what is consciousness. What is it made of? What are the constituents or the composing factors of consciousness? The human consciousness that we are referring to is nothing but the aggregate of this knowledge. It's nothing but this whole conceptual structure. And through untold centuries, we have been feeding upon this. We have been nourished upon this. So we feel that the conceptual is the real. We feel that the name is the thing. We feel that the word God is the magnificent totality. So to realize that the conceptual world is a construct of human brain, it is a contrivance for entering into a relationship with that which is name-free, word-free, time-free, symbol-free, idea-free. So we live simultaneously on the perceptual and the conceptual. That's the beauty of it. That's the complexity of human life. So consciousness is an energy constituted of sounds, their meanings, energy created by repetition. You go on repeating certain words and that word gets an energy. You go on saying there is God, there is God, there is God. And you grow into a belief that the word God or the concept God has a factual reality, a factual content. Repetition creates the illusion of factual content. You create a place and you visit it 5 times a day or 3 times a day and say that's a holy place. It may be a room like any other room, but you visit it. You want to feel holy, you want to feel sacred, and you say that is the place for feeling holy, feeling sacred. You have created it yourself. And you go there with the expectation of feeling holy or sacred. And you have called it a sacred place, a temple, a church, a mosque, a gurudwara, a synagogue, or what have you. You created, you built that shape yourself with the intention, with the need to have a place where you can feel the sacredness, the holiness, where you can feel the immensity. So you build the place with the motivation, you go there and you repeat there. By repetition, and by your going there 5 times or 3 times a day or a week, you fill the place with a particular energy. You create an atmosphere, a vibrational atmosphere in the place. See how we create things? We project them and then we feel them and we go and repeat feeling. I hope that this is not very difficult to understand. The process of repetition creates an energy. So this conceptual world of naming and identifying, following the patterns, repeating the conditionings, approximating everything we do to certain ideas and ideologies, has filled those words and concepts with tremendous energy. Millions and millions of human beings have been following certain patterns, and they have been transmitted neurochemically into the children. You teach them in schools and colleges, and you transmit them the patterns, the associations. So what we call the mental movement, what we call the movement of thought structure, what we call the movement of my ego, myself, the me, the I, is a movement of this conceptual world within us. You open the eyes reach out towards objects, the memory brings up the name, conditionings and culture bring up the emotional reaction to the name, and you react according to the conditionings. This goes on. You react to gestures, you react to words, you react to glances. You see, the sensual contact stimulates that movement inside. So consciousness has the content of knowledge, it has the content of thought, the human experience, the innumerable patterns, their designs, their niceties, their intricacies, their nuances. And what we call our life and living is the movement of this construct, this constructed conceptual world. My emotional life, my intellectual life is nothing but the movement of this globally created structure. It's a vibrational structure transmitted into our nervous system, our chemical system, from crown of the head to the big toe. We are that. So now, what happens is, when I want to relate to life and I want to live, I find that there is no freedom for relationship, because it is the movement of the thought that jumps up and it reaches out towards the present, towards life. It names, it identifies, it reacts. And this happens with such a terrible speed that there is no scope for any other relationship but through the movement of thought. I wonder if you have really ever thought about these things and worked upon yourselves to find out that our lives are just the movement of total human past. No originality, no individuality. It's a mechanical movement. It's very useful to deal with the structured society. Wherever you turn, science and technology Social sciences have created structures. Acquire information about the structure, use the structure. So you can acquire information about economic structure and handle it. The more competently and skillfully you use it, you handle it, you become rich, wealthy, or whatever. You study the political structure and you handle it. You get acquainted with the structure of technology and you become expert in it. You know, structured society, specialization in particular structures, handling them, the skill in them, isn't that our life? So this movement of thought, this mechanical movement in us of receiving information, retaining it in memory and exercising it when necessary is useful in its limited field. Building houses, bridges, huge buildings, planning for the family, planning for the city, if you are working in a municipality. All these cultivated and transmitted powers of thought, of imagination, of memory, etc., are very useful when you have to deal with specific structures. But the structured society of money, power, sex, family, marketing, business, industry, politics, etc., is only a tiny part of total life. People living in Canada, in America, different parts of America, highly industrialized and affluent countries like Switzerland, Netherlands, Sweden, etc. They are very expert. Children from very small age, they grow with the aptitude to handle technology, science. So this movement of the brain and this movement of the nervous system and chemistry of the body, which is a necessity for living in modern society, is there. But that is not the totality of life. We have acquired skill in dealing with structures and objects. We can go to the moon, the Jupiter, the Mars, the Venus. But when it comes to living with one another as human beings, living with one another without conflict, without tension, living with non-human species, not coexisting with them and killing them for our pleasure, but really living together with them, sharing the resources of the planet with the non-human species, with the human species. Not as plunderers of the planet, but really living with the mountains, the rivers, the birds, the animals, etc. We don't know. At the end of the 20th century, we don't know how to live as human beings, because the human being has the capacity to sense dimension of love. And human being feels the need of love. He may live in attachment, terribly attached to objects and individuals, and yet inwardly the human being feels attachment is not love. The human beings might live in violence and be violent with one another, yet they feel that there is a way of living entirely free of violence. When you use the word love, you need not use the word non-violence. Non-violence is the perfume of love. It cannot exist without love. So, there is in the human consciousness, living in the cage of various limitations, a sense, a feel of something that is beyond the structures, the limitations, the names, the theories, the identifications. Nobody may point it out to me. I may not read a book, and yet there is the feel. So, this need for love, need for truth, need for freedom, for friendship, for compassion, it has been felt through centuries. People have written books, novels, poetry, essays, and yet we are unable to do it. Look at the pathetic condition. Cerebral activity par excellence, and the chemical behavior, which is the emotional behavior, cannot keep pace with the growth and sophistication of the brain. So we don't know how to live with nature and with fellow human beings and fellow non-human beings in utter freedom, love and friendship. That's our problem. And life without love and compassion, life without freedom and inner peace is really meaningless. You may feel attracted towards money, sex in the beginning as you are growing, and you go on repeating pleasures, sensual, sexual, you go on repeating living in the limitations of so-called security, and the very repetitiveness wakes you up one day and says, hey, is that all? Is there nothing more to life? So we are now questioning, is there any other way of living than the living through concepts and ideas and theories and patterns, which have a limited relevance, and we may use those in the field of relativity. But living which is being related to one another requires some other dimension. That is where religion or spirituality steps in. The thought process and its movement cannot bring about a transformation or mutation through its effort. And let us see why it cannot do so. A thought cannot move without a word, can it? Have you ever come across a thought that has no word? It may not have sound if you do not articulate the thought. But a thought means a word, a name, having a particular meaning which is accepted by society. So the meaning of the word is standardized, organized. The thought is a movement of a word, along with its definitions, its meanings, chiseled out by society, accepted by society. So the movement of thought is rooted in the past. Can thought move without time? As the movement of thought is a movement of words representing concepts and ideas, can it move without time? We have created the psychological time. Mankind has created. Time is one of the basic constituents of the thought structure. So you create a second, an hour, a day of 24 hours, and a month of 30 days. In life, in reality, there are no moments, there are no hours, there are no days. It's a marvelous isness. But in the process of getting related to it, you created a measurement. The sun is there, but you see it and you say sun has risen. The sun rise at 7 a.m. or the sun set at such and such a time. Does the sun ever set? Does the sun ever rise? But you have imposed the concept of rising and setting upon the phenomenon of the visibility of sun to you. It's a reflection upon our sensual limitation, but we call it sunrise, sunset. Depending upon this concept of sunrise and sunset, you have tried to divide the isness into hours. Isn't that the content of psychological time? The imaginary division in the wholeness of eternity. Imaginary division and measuring of those divisions with the help of concepts. In the division-free totality, psychological time is a creation of the human mind. The todays, the tomorrows, the yesterdays, the words past, present, future. But we don't look upon the word past as a past. For us, there is a past existing somewhere behind the wall. We have created an entity called the past. And we feel there is an entity called the future. You see how the words indicating concepts are mistaken for reality. Now, when a thought moves, which is a movement of words having meanings, it also moves in today's and yesterday's and tomorrow's. The movement of thought is the movement of time. So, this movement of thought, which cannot move without symbols, concepts and theories, is not going to reveal. So it becomes necessary, by observing the movement of mind, to see the limitations. When you see the limitations, you are not condemning them. You are not saying that the whole human knowledge and experience is of no value. It has its value on the material level, on the sensual level. But the sensual, the perceptual, and the mental, which is conceptual, they do not reveal the essence of reality. They do not produce the energy of love and compassion. They do not confer upon you the vitality to transcend the violence in you. Do you see our difficulty? We would love to live with one another in love and peace and friendship. And thought does not help there. All the religions, the philosophies, the theologies, the political ideologies, the economic ideologies, they have not enabled the human race. Democratic countries, socialist countries, religious, so-called religious countries, including your India, country famous as the cradle of religions and spiritual sects and teachers and so on. So if we do not wish to live perpetually in violence, in conflict, we have to explore other energies than the energy of thought and the movement of thought going on in us neurochemically. A religious inquiry is really exploration of new energies than the energy of concepts and ideas, than the energies of symbols, than the energy of repetitive mechanistic movement. Please do see this. In such retreats, we are embarking upon that exploration. Otherwise, retreats have no meaning. This is an exploration on behalf of the whole human race. Do we live perpetually as prisoners of the movement of thought and limited by that energy, or do we explore and tap other energies? As the physicists are tapping, they are exploring the nature of energies concealed in emptiness. They have dealt with the energies contained in atoms. They have gone up to nuclear energy. Now they are exploring the energies contained in the emptiness of space. And we are concerned with exploring the energies concealed in the emptiness of consciousness. How do we know that there is emptiness in consciousness? How do we know that the movement of thought, the whole movement of human knowledge, has not permeated our whole being? Is there any basis for even imagining that there could be something? And one would like to say, yes, there is a basis, not in the life of few, but of all of us, in the lives of you and me, common people. Look at what happens to us in profound sleep. We spend 1/3 of our life in sleeping, 8 hours a day. Out of the 24 hours, 1/3 of our life, if the span is 100 years, 33 years are spent in sleeping. It's an important part of life. What happens to us during sleep? Is the thought moving there? Is the I, the me, the self busy moving? Is it the I that is creating something out of sleep? Is there a movement of the me, the self, creating profound sleep, creating the rejuvenation that occurs in sleep? Isn't profound sleep an absence of the movement of the ego? Obviously, the ego is moving if you are dreaming. When you dream, and if you spend all the 8 hours dreaming, then dreaming is not sleeping. It's neither being awake nor being asleep. Or rather, it is nearer to being awake than to being asleep. Because even in our waking consciousness, we are dreaming most of the time. It's an extension. Dream consciousness is an extension of waking consciousness. But if we are asleep, the ego doesn't move. You don't know what is happening. There is no experience of profound sleep. It's a happening, the profound dream-free sleep, a marvelous state of total relaxation. And when you are out of it, you find that even from the nails and the hair, everything has grown. It's rejuvenated. You are a different person, as if you are reborn. And I don't know how to put it across to you, but one really feels when one opens eyes in the morning as if one has been dead and one is reborn. In the 50s, from 1953 up to early 60s, 1963, I was working with Sant Vinoba, the saint Vinoba Bhave, disciple of Mahatma Gandhi. He was known in America as the Saint on March. I don't know if any of you is aware, the great-grandson of poet Tennyson, Hallam Tennyson, was working with me in that movement, and he wrote a book, Saint on the March, about that. That saint, that Vinobaji used to say, when he would go to bed in the evening, he would say he was going to rehearse death. Sleeping he called rehearsal of death, dying. And fresh like morning dew, he would wake up. Every day we used to march about 12 to 14 miles. 3:30 in the morning the march would begin, and we would walk from one village to another, about 4 hours, and he would work the whole day. So profound sleep is not the movement of time. There is no movement of time, no consciousness of time, no movement of the ego, and yet there is life. There is movement of unconditioned energies within you. That is the basis to talk about unconditioned energies in our being. Sometime in your life, you find yourself wrapped up in an indescribable, inexplicable dimension of love. Some person stimulates that dimension in you. Something causes the emergence of that dimension. And strange things happen there. The ego doesn't move. It doesn't say, what am I going to get out of this love? Normally, in relationship, the ego doesn't move without the motivation. Its every movement is acquisitive. It wants to acquire something out of its movement. It wants to add something to its pre-existing acquisitions. But when love visits you, maybe it lasts for a day, for a year, for a month, you are in a state, if I may use the term, of complete egolessness. You are not concerned with what you are going to out of it. You are concerned with the happiness of the person that has caused the emergence of that dimension. You nearly want to pour your whole being into every act of relationship with that person. The consciousness of time, the motivations existing in the mind, the fear of society, the consideration of other people in the family, everything evaporates. As if you are in a dimension of timelessness and egolessness. So obviously, there seems to be some other energy potentially existing. It may not last, that beautiful dimension of love, and within a short time, the ego comes up and the whole dimension begins to recede, as it were. And the old habit of what did I get out of it and what did you get out of it, and the calculation and bargaining at the counter of relationships begins. But I think in everybody's life, there are such moments or days, or there is such time. So there is enough basis to presume that there are other dimensions to consciousness than the dimension of time and thought. So one wants to find out, is there a way of being free of the movement of ego, not while you are asleep as it happens, but while you are awake? Meditation is being free of the movement of the ego in waking consciousness. So that the other dimension, the unconditioned dimension, the dimension that is free, entirely free of the sense of time, wakes up in your being. Unless another dimension wakes up in our being, it is activized in our being, obviously there will be no freedom from the movement of the ego. And as long as that movement of the I, the self, continues, there will be conflicts. There will be tensions. There will be violence. Thought has not set man free, and thought shall never set man free. So, when we use the term transformation of consciousness, as has been used in the theme suggested to me, I hope we are not under an illusion that the content of thought is going to be changed and transformed. That the present pattern of thinking is going to be replaced by some new pattern. That the present concepts are going to be replaced by some new concepts. If you replace the word realization of God by the word transformation, that doesn't make a change. So, thought is not going to be liberated. The thought and its structure cannot be transformed. It can understand its own nature. Being a self-conscious energy, it can look at itself. It can inquire. And it can observe, come face to face with its limitations, and see the futility of its movement, all that can happen to thought. Seeing the futility, it may relax into non-action. But it is what it is. You cannot transform the thought by creating a parallel thought structure. I am troubled and tortured by compulsive sex, so I create a concept of celibacy. I want to be celibate. And I work out a discipline for being celibate. Eat this food and wear those clothes and live in such a way, and then you can be celibate. Against the compulsive sex, I create a thought and a structure of celibacy. There was very much attachment in my life, so I create an idea of renunciation, detachment, and I create a pattern. So instead of following this pattern, I follow the other pattern. I was attached to the house, the family, the husband, the wife. I move over to an ashram, monastery, what you will, and become attached to my guru, master, teacher. I get attached to the disciples around that master, my guru bhai, or whatever it is. You get attached to the building of the monastery, the temple, the ashram. So, transformation of consciousness does not imply transformation of thought from ignoble thought to noble thought. Bad thoughts and good thoughts. We have played around with that game through organized religions and institutionalized institutions of religion. We have played around with that. We have played around with that through indoctrination. The totalitarian societies have regimented the brains. Rather, they have tried to regiment, feeding in patterns. You know Pavlov's psychology, behavioral psychology. It hasn't worked, either through politics, through violence, or through institutions of religion. Do you see where human race is standing today? So the challenge is to find out if this movement can end so that another movement gets released. The wrong movement, going in the wrong direction has to discontinue for the right one, the proper one, the other one to come into existence. We cannot say, please tell me how the right one is going to begin. Give me its timetable. What is the guarantee that I will have it? You see the trap? The thought says, I will stop moving if you can promise that after stopping there will be something, and I must know what that something is. Will there be security in that something? Will it be under my control? Thought wants to come back. It wants to control the unconditioned. It wants to bring the unknown into the framework of the known. It wants to experience it, identify it. So have a method, have a technique, have a timetable, have a guarantee. Otherwise, I'll continue. Even if it is wrong, I continue with the wrong. You see? So let us end this morning session with the point that transformation of consciousness does not imply transforming the thought as it is, sublimating it. Though it's very unpleasant the movement of knowledge and thought has to be ended. In the ending of the movement of knowledge and experience, in the ending of the movement of the ego, is the beginning of the new. As light destroys darkness, as truth pierces through the untruth, as understanding pierces ignorance, perceiving the futility of the movement of the ego, results in the ending of it. Unless we cling to it out of fear, even after perceiving the truth about the repetitiveness, the mechanisticness, the built-in limitations, even after perceiving all this, if we cling to the movement of the me out of fear, then the observation and the understanding cannot help us. You know, truth is not difficult to come by, but to have the willingness to let the untruth drop away completely. That's very difficult. To discriminate the false from the truth is not very difficult. You go, you work out step by step. You work hard. You make the brain exercise all its powers. And you see the false. But after seeing the falsity, to let the false drop, that doesn't happen in our life. We defend the false, we justify the false. So it is our fear of freedom, it is our fear of the unknown that keeps us clinging to the known. You may call me a utopian, but as one sees the future of humanity, one notices that as the state of egolessness through sleep is woven into the biological structure of the human race, the day is not far off when meditation as a state of egolessness will be woven into the very fabric of waking consciousness of the whole human species, because without it, it will not be possible to coexist with computers and electronic brains that we are sophisticating day by day. To live in company with computers and electronic brains that can think, that can speak, that can receive and organize information, that can indulge in permutation, combination of the information, that can deduce conclusions, to coexist with them. They are going to take over your cerebral activities one by one, as the electronic gadgets have taken over one by one the physical. the washing machine, the ovens, the cars, the aeroplanes, the jets. Haven't they taken over? They have taken over your entertainment. They have taken over your physical work. Children have started using calculators. They don't have to exercise their brain for addition, subtraction, etc. So if we do not want to go, or rather, if we do not want to lapse into cerebral atrophy, we have to exercise and find out if there is any other dimension. What are the contents of the parts of brain that are not used by us? We are not using the whole brain. There are parts in the frontal lobe and some parts of the temples, both ways. So they must be having energies. There are so many cavities in the body where there is beautiful emptiness. There is emptiness in every blood cell. So we have to explore. The energy is contained in the emptiness within, in the unused, unchannelized parts of the grey matter in brain, and so on and so forth. Wasn't there a period in human history when our lives were governed by impulses? The biological structure has beautiful movement of impulses. Sex impulse, the impulse for sleep, appetite, thirst. Lives were governed by them. And then we grew into rationality, reason. The movement of impulses is there, but they do not rule the life. Reason started, rationality, logical clarity, mathematical precision, scientific openness, and tentativeness of approach. They took over the control of human life. So then reason started using, mobilizing the energy of impulses so that the energy of impulses and the energy of reason could make one harmonious whole. You know, the history of human race is your history and my history. The human race lives through you and me. In the same way, the energy is contained in the unconditioned parts of our being. When released, use the energy of the ego, the me, the self, the energy of thought to make one harmonious whole. The unconditioned energies, harnessing the conditioned energies and the impulses to make one harmonious, homogeneous wholeness of our life. Isn't that a thrilling period to live when thought is challenged? When the movement of ego is challenged? It's a beautiful period. Turn in any direction and you find problems created by the thought structure. So you are with your back to the wall, cannot escape. What do you say, Judy? Isn't that a very thrilling period for human history? But I think I must stop. I won't need all that space.